A famous Hoosier artist lived in this beautiful location during his Brown County period. Learn more about T.C. Steele today on Indiana Outdoors. Hello and welcome to Indiana Outdoors. I'm Jill Ditmire.
And I'm Don Van Meter. As you can see, it's spring in Brown County. And today we're at the home of painter T.C. Steele.
It's called the House of the Singing Winds, and it's nestled in the hills right between Nashville and Bloomington.
Later on today, we're going to talk to the curator of this historic site. But first of all, we're going to get a sneak peek at one of Indiana's newest state parks.
It's called Prophetstown State Park, and it's located in Battleground. It's near Lafayette, and it's named for the Battle of Tippecanoe. Now, the park isn't completely open yet, but it is making progress.
This is a memorial to the Battle of Tippecanoe of 1811. Due to the rich history of the area, Indiana is building its newest state park just a few miles away. Building Prophetstown State Park in the area of the original Prophetstown Village helps tribute our nation's first people and their struggle to survive.
Well, the Battle of Tippecanoe, of course, ended the Prophetstown experiment. Tecumseh and Tenskwatawa were Shawnee brothers, and the Shawnee could see that their homeland was going to be invaded and taken away if they didn't try to resist. And so their father was the war chief of their band of Shawnee, and he was actually killed in battle shortly after the American Revolution. So Tecumseh made a vow that he would never quit resisting the European settlers.
The prophet and his brother Tecumseh believed that the land belonged to all Native Americans, so they brought the tribes together to form one village. They called it Kathtipi-Kananqui. The Europeans called it Prophetstown.
I believe that Prophetstown came from the English and French and Americans who came here and knew that the prophet was living here and that he was one of the key figures in the village. The Indian people joke about who really was the most important here, Tecumseh or Tenskwatawa, and they'll often say, well, if Tecumseh had been the most important, then they would have called it Tecumseh Town, but they didn't. They called it Prophetstown.
The cultural significance, of course, is the Battle of Tippecanoe, and even more importantly, the idea of the confederation of tribes that came here to be kind of one last stand against the white settlement that was coming into their territory.
The culture and history surrounding Prophetstown aren't the only reasons that the new state park is here. The museums at Prophetstown provide a visitor center and living history museums.
The Wabash Living History Farm is a 1920s era farm, and really what we want people to know is how and where their food is raised. But we also want to show the 1920s because it was a tremendous period of change. We were going from human and animal power to machinery and technology.
From the natural side, this is a glaciated terrain that was greatly influenced by glaciers and also by a huge torrent of water that came down the Wabash River. And so we have a very interesting geologic terrain here, unlike really probably anywhere else in the state.
Well, the biggest challenge is really working with this whole new type of park. This will be the first prairie-style park, especially this size, the state of Indiana has developed for the park system. We've designed the park to really fit in with both the natural cultural sides of the history of the area. The natural features of the park include prairies, tall grass prairies, and wetlands, known here particularly as a fen, which is kind of a rare type of wetland in Indiana, where it's really fed more by groundwater than surface water. Well, we tried to integrate the design of the park not only with the lay of the land, but also the layout. It's a linear park, about 3,000 acres that the state of Indiana is purchasing for this facility. And within those facilities, we've laid them out symbolically, so to speak, more like an Indian village and some of the features the Native American Indians used. Particularly the circle of life was one of their main cultural symbols. And we are going to have some playgrounds here for use with the campgrounds and some of the picnic areas, and we've designed those in a circular fashion that take on that circle of life image, as well as other Native American Indian images.
The unique thing about this park, I think, is that what we're trying to do, because of that historical connection, we want to try to recreate, if we can, what was this terrain like in 1811, and then kind of try to hold it there.
We've had visitors coming from all over the world already for this project, so we think that it'll be a wonderful way for American people, for Hoosiers, for all of our international visitors to learn about American farm agriculture, the prairie environment, and Native Americans.
The Department of Natural Resources manages a number of properties across the state, including the T.C. Steele State Historic Site.
And joining us today is curator Andrea Smith. Andrea, tell us something about T.C. Steele.
Well, T.C. Steele was one of Indiana's most prominent artists. He worked in the late 19th and early 20th century and came here to Brown County in 1907. It's his Brown County period paintings that are his most famous today.
Mm-hmm. And I can see where the inspiration came from. This is an absolutely gorgeous site.
Well, a lot of people today come to Brown County for hiking. Steele came here for the first time in 1906 on a hiking trip and fell in love with the area. I guess he figured he would never run out of places to paint.
What was this area like when T.C. Steele first saw it?
As an artist, he was attracted by the tremendous vistas. Most of this area had been cleared for farming, but a lot of the early farms were being abandoned. This was one of them. And you had young trees and brush reclaiming what had been farmland. So looking out over the hills, you had these layers of purple hills with just enough growth on the hillsides to soften the lines. It was those views that he fell in love with and wanted to paint.
Yeah, the colors are just fantastic here, and I can only imagine what the upkeep of this place must be like, the gardens.
This place keeps us pretty busy.
Yeah.
We've been restoring Mrs. Steele's gardens the last few years, and even now what you see is only a small part of what was once here. I think she took her gardening as seriously as Mr. Steele took his painting.
Yes. Andrea, how many acres of gardens do you have here today?
Out of the 211 acres on the property, about 20 are mowed and cultivated.
It must take quite a few people to take care of the gardens today.
It does keep us pretty busy.
How many people do you have working here?
We have 3 full-time and 3 seasonal positions. That's to do everything, not just the gardens.
And how about volunteers?
Well, we're very fortunate that we have an active volunteer group. It's called the Friends of T.C. Steele. And without their help, there's no way we would have gotten as far as we have with the garden restoration. They've been a tremendous help.
Now, he also lived in other areas across Indiana
That's
as well.
correct. Now, he spent his last years here, but before he came to Brown County, he had spent many years painting all over southern and central Indiana. For many years, he had a winter home base in Indianapolis. And before he came here, he had a seasonal home in Brookville, in Franklin County. He probably would have stayed there if it hadn't been for the death of his first wife.
I understand, too, that didn't he spend some time in Germany with some other Indiana artists?
That's correct. He spent 5 years studying at the Royal Academy of Art in Munich. That's where he got his formal training. And there were a number of other Indiana artists who were there at the same time. So many, in fact, that they nicknamed it the Hoosier Colony in Munich.
Well, it's a wonderful place to come just to enjoy the beauty, but there are some other things that visitors can enjoy when they come visit the home.
Besides the guided tours of Mr. Steele's studio and the house and all the paintings that are there, we also have 5 hiking trails. We have a little log cabin. It has kind of a mini nature center. We have a 92-acre nature preserve as well, so there is a lot to see and do for the outdoor lover.
I've also been told there are a couple of snakes around here. Now, I'm
well.
hoping this is Hoosier folklore.
Well, no. You get out into the country, you get a few, you have to deal with the wildlife too. I believe the story you heard was about a couple of local residents.
Fred and Wilma.
Fred and Wilma, yes. Fred is about 7.5 feet long.
Oh my, I'll be stepping lightly.
Do you have other wildlife around?
Oh yes. In fact, some of that wildlife presents a little bit of a challenge. The deer, for example.
Yes, the flowers.
As we've been restoring the gardens, they like to think of that as their personal salad bar.
Buffet.
Yes.
It's a little bit of a challenge sometimes.
Is spring probably your busiest season here?
Spring and autumn as well. A lot of people come to Brown County for the fall foliage.
That's true. Well, Andrea, it's been wonderful speaking with you, and we're just so pleased to be here today, and we're hoping you're going to enjoy the tour too.
Thanks for having us.
You're quite welcome.
The House of the Singing Winds is located between Nashville and Bloomington at Belmont. Guided tours of the T.C. Steele home are available. Write to the address on your screen or call 812-988-2785. We learned that T.C. Steele isn't the only Indiana artist who loves nature.
No, he's not. I know who also is, and here's a hint. He's a cartoonist whose cat loves lasagna.
And his company, Paws Incorporated, has an environmental conscience.
I'm Jim Davis, and I work for a big fat orange cat named Garfield. When I started the Garfield strip about 22 years ago, and there was some interest in licensing going on, I created Paws Incorporated. I wanted to build Paws right here in Indiana, in the countryside, because I grew up on a farm about 25 miles from here. Friends and family are here, and for me, the creative process works better with lots of space around it. I don't care for traffic and crowds, and out here, our imaginations are only limited by the sky. I love being in the country. I always wanted to be around the country, around farm life, but not have to bale hay anymore. So this is just a great environment to muse and to create, to relax, and, you know, to visualize what can be. Right around Paws, on a few hundred acres around here, we've been very busy making the environment nicer. We've taken the marginal farmland and returned it to forest, to prairie, to wetlands, things like that. We've also released some quail and pheasants into the environment. In our prairie land, we like to cut paths because wildlife likes edges.
The restoration projects that we've undertaken probably take in somewhere between 200 and 300 acres. We've restored this farm ground to native prairie, tall and short grass, wildflowers, and native hardwood forest. My name is Bill Duell, and I'm a landscape artist here at Paws Incorporated. The land that we've decided to do the restoration projects on lies within an area that I believe is approximately 3 miles on a side if you drew a square with Paws in the center of it.
Also, we have what we call a solar aquatic system. Basically, it's a sewage treatment plant that handles the sewage very naturally. And we use sunlight, algae, fish, air, things like that to clean the water. And quite frankly, without the use of chemicals, we operate at 1/10 the state minimums. And so it's great. It's great to be able to do that, also to beat the system in a way as well.
A solar aquatic system uses natural plants and animals in a system kind of mimicking nature, only in a contained setting to treat wastewater, like a wetland would, only more efficiently, and it's set up so it can function particularly efficiently in the wintertime. My name is Russ Vernon, and I'm the plant manager and horticulturist at Paws. My responsibilities at Paws are to take care of all the indoor plants and to take care of the wastewater treatment and the well water to make sure that it's clean for drinking as well. The way the solar aquatic system works, when the water enters the system from across the street and the buildings that make up Paws, it comes into these solar tanks, and there's 6 of them in total. 5 of them are aerated and 1 is not. And this is where all the bacterial activity occurs to convert the wastewater into plant nutrients dissolved in the water. And we have plants in the tank such as water hyacinths, and in this tank we have duckweed, We also have snails in the tanks. And what's happening is the bacteria does this conversion, and then the plants absorb the nutrients and remove it from the water, and that's how we get clean water. The next step in the process happens when the water leaves the last solar tank and it enters the lagoon over here. This is aerated also, and it's where plants grow really fast and they're rapidly absorbing the nutrients out of the water. Then the water moves from the lagoon over to the constructed wetland or the marsh, and you can see it's built in two sections. The water will flow on one section one day and it'll flow in the other section the next. And we have tropical plants. We have things like hibiscus and ginger plant and angel trumpets. The environmental advantages to a solar aquatic system are that you're getting fairly close to nature and using natural processes, and it's a much friendlier environment to be in aesthetically as compared to a regular system. We do use ultraviolet light to disinfect our water as it leaves, so we don't have to use chemicals to do that. The SAS system is relatively new on the scene. The use of it here at Paws was the first commercial use of it, the first time they'd gotten a regular operating permit from any governmental agency. I've always felt that if you can use systems to kind of remediate some of we human beings' ills on the earth, that's obviously a better way to go, kind of like recycling.
As far as being responsible to the environment, it's nice to have a good canvas to work with, if you will. And I'm talking about living here in Indiana. It's such a great place to live and raise a family. There's a lot of farmland, and it's been such a great environment to grow up with. That's something I think that we would like to preserve for a long, long time to come.
Jill, you've told me that you visited nearly every winery in Indiana, right?
Well, that's true, Don, but let's not give the audience the wrong idea. I was actually working.
Oh, sure. Recently, Indiana Outdoors went to the beautiful Madison Vineyards near the Ohio River.
Madison Vineyards is one of 3 wineries in Madison, but owner and winemaker Steve Palmer actually grows his own grapes.
The Ohio River Valley, the climate is very well suited for grape growing. In fact, historically, the first commercial winery and vineyard in the United States was in Vevey, which is about 20 miles east of us. About 1802, Jean-Jacques Dufour took a keg of his first wine by horseback to Washington City and served it to Thomas Jefferson in the White House. It was the same day that a courier arrived from Lewis and Clark with water from the Missouri River, and so Jefferson dined that evening with Missouri water and Indiana wine. We've got 38 acres of land with about just over 10 acres planted in grapes so far. We plant a little every year. Right now, our principal plantings are French hybrid grapes, names most people haven't heard of, like Seyval Blanc, Vidal, Rougeon. This last spring we planted our first vinifera, which is the classic European variety. We planted Cabernet Sauvignon, Merlot, and another red Bordeaux called Petit Verdot. And from that blend of grapes, we'll be making 2 Bordeaux-style dry red wines. The second week in August, we begin picking, and different varieties of grapes ripen at different times. Yeah, we pick by hand, hire generally local people to pick for us, and they begin around 5:30 in the morning, about the first light, and they pick until around 10:30 or 11 o'clock. We have to bring the grapes, particularly the whites, in while they're still cool so we don't lose some color. The grapes are run through a crusher destemmer to crush the berry and strip off the stalk. The juice in crushed berry then falls through this stemmer into a tray and is then put into a fermentation vessel. Fermentation essentially is the yeast eating the sugar and giving off two byproducts. One's carbon dioxide and the other's alcohol. If you haven't been to Madison before, you ought to come down and check us out. We are one of the largest historic districts in the United States. Another draw to Madison is that there are 3 wineries in the area, and you can visit all three wineries in one afternoon.
Our final story today is about a relatively new problem to Indiana waters.
The zebra mussel was accidentally introduced into North America in 1988, and now these exotic mollusks have infested many of Indiana's lakes and streams.
To learn more about the zebra mussel, Indiana Outdoors went to the marina at Michigan City.
Zebra mussels most likely arrived in North America in the ballast water of an ocean-going vessel. This vessel would have picked up ballast to steady its load in, say, the Black or the Caspian Sea, crossed the Atlantic, and then released its ballast water and the zebra mussels that were in the ballast water into the Great Lakes. There are over 20 lakes in Indiana that are infested with zebra mussels. In fact, Lake Wawasee in northern Indiana was the first inland lake to be infested in North America. Most of the lakes in Indiana that are infested tend to be in the northern parts of the state, actually where we have most of our inland lakes. There are also a couple rivers in the state that are infested, including the Ohio River and the Wabash River. Zebra mussel is a small bivalve mollusk. Bivalve meaning that it has 2 shells, and a mollusk is that it's similar to a clam. Zebra mussels look different from our native species. Zebra mussels are small, they only get to be about 1 inch long, and they have different coloration than our native mussels. They can be all brown, they can be almost all cream colored, but most of them have kind of racing stripes that give them their name of zebra mussels. And they also are more of a D shape, whereas most of our native mussels tend to be flatter or more kind of pocketbook shaped. Zebra mussels tend to live in colonies. It's rare that you'll see an individual zebra mussel on its own. And it's very common to see large collections of zebra mussels where you have one zebra mussel upon another zebra mussel attached to another zebra mussel.
A lot of the structures that hang in the water or the pier heads and rock structures, sometimes zebra mussels will attach to those. These chains are used for the in-water boat show, and which was 3 weeks ago, and it appears that they've been reinfested after being out of the water or partially out of the water. So anything that's kind of hanging in, and that includes the boats that are around here, they'll attach. That boat is left in the water, so they can reduce the if enough of them get on there, they can kind of foul up your steering and also reduce your speed because of just the mass that they end up building on there.
One concern of ours is that zebra mussels tend to have high levels of contaminants in their body just because they're exposed to the sediments, they're exposed to algae and so much water. One zebra mussel can filter up to 1 liter of water per day. Zebra mussels can clog up the water intake pipes of these industries and municipal water suppliers. They can also get into the internal systems, such as the firefighting equipment or the storage areas that these industries have. And this has been a big economic problem for these industries, as well as for then the consumers of these products, such as electricity and drinking water.
There's nothing that really utilizes these guys. They're kind of unique. Their shape is unique. So there are some fish that do eat them. but they don't concentrate on them as a steady diet. So these guys are here at least for a long, long time until some type of predator can decide to utilize these guys.
Individual recreational water users can take steps to help slow or prevent the spread of zebra mussels. These steps involve inspecting their equipment, all equipment such as boats, motors, trailers, bumpers, things like that. Another step is to empty bait buckets on land, never into the water. Again, these bait buckets can carry zebra mussel villagers in the water. And to clean the boat with either hot water or a high pressure sprayer, or to allow it to stand in the sun or to dry for 5 days. And then we encourage people to learn more about zebra mussels and other exotic species so that they know what the issues are and the types of economic and ecological problems that these exotics can cause.
Since they do cling to structures, you can see that, you know, if a guy had his boat or a boat was left in the water for a while, they'll attach, and then if he decides to trailer his boat out and take it to another lake, he's just transported these critters to another body of water, either in Indiana or Michigan, Illinois, wherever they may be. So that's a real concern for Indiana Department of Natural Resources and the other Department of Natural Resource agencies, is the transport of these guys. Some of our inland lakes have that guys fish Lake Michigan with their boats and then go to inland waterways. We have zebra mussels in those now too, so it's created some difficulty for those inland lakes as well.
The biggest problem with zebra mussels is probably their ecological impacts, and these will probably be the most long-term impacts that we see. If you find zebra mussels in a lake or a river, it'd be great if you were to report it. You can report these findings to either the Indiana DNR, Division of Fisheries, or to Illinois Indiana Sea Grant. By reporting these findings, we're then able to let people know that these water bodies are infested, and then they can take special steps to prevent the spread from this water body to an uninfested water body.
If you're a boat owner, we hope that you'll take precautions so as not to spread the zebra mussel throughout Indiana. Well, that's about all the time we have today.
Yep, we need to go check out some of the paintings.
All right, good idea.
We want to thank the folks at the TC Steele State Historic Site for inviting us down here today, and we'll see you again next time on Indiana Outdoors.
Bye, everybody.
I can't wait to take a look at some of those.
For a copy of today's program, call 1-800-252-WIPB. Or send a $10 check payable to WIPB-TV, Ball State University, Muncie, Indiana, 47306.